I'm Nick, and welcome to my shop. Today I'm going to be talking about the 5 most used tools that I have. These are the ones that in the last year I found that are always in my hand, the one that I'm reaching for, the ones that get used the most. So for some background, I'm a wood turner. I don't do much flat work at all. I don't own a table saw in the shop. Mainly it's the big lathe and the bandsaw. So this is kind of a little bit different than other woodworkers because, I do different things. So let's get to it. So the first tool that I use is actually protection. It's the Smock. I actually have multiple of these floating around the shop, and they are absolutely like the thing you need to have if you're a wood turner. A lot of like the chips come at you, and these things you can actually put zipper all the way up, tight collar, so you don't get chips down your shirt. Now, they are pretty itchy when they get down in there. So this is actually just a really good comfort thing. And you've seen the previous videos, like I get covered in sawdust and everything, and this just kind of keeps it off my clothes. So I highly recommend a Smock in the shop, the breathable, lightweight. So if you're out in the heat or anything, like your garage door's open, these things are actually pretty comfortable. You would guess that the next tool on the list would be the lathe, but honestly, I have 2 of these. So this is my, I have a big full-size lathe here, but I also have a midi lathe, a mid-size lathe that I turn on quite a bit.
Man, that dust collector is loud.
So the next tool on the list are my headphones. These are actually made by IsoTunes. There's other companies that make them, or headphones like this. These are hearing protecting headphones that also you can play music through and everything. They also have a transparency mode. So when I was at the makerspace, it was a shared shop, and I could hear what's going on around me, but still being protected from the loud machines. Like the dust collector in that shop was super loud. But I really like these. I can listen to music, audiobooks, and everything while I'm sanding or doing whatever in the shop that's just noisy. The next tool on the list is the sander. So these are just right angle drills that I got from Harbor Freight, and they're just cheap tools. And I do that because, I buy multiple of them. Number one, you don't have to switch around the discs as much. And also, I go through these. So I've had several in the past, and they just kind of like wear out, and you got to get rid of them. You tend to overheat these things because, do a lot of heavy sanding, they heat up. So it's nice to have multiple to switch through to help them cool down in between. I know some wood turners actually have just permanently per grit sanders, so they'll have like 5 sanders sitting there and they just go down the line. I don't have that many yet, but I'm kind of getting there with all the different sanders. These things are great because I can sand, but also if I put down like a lower grit, like an 80 grit disc on this thing, I can remove material. So these are kind of joked out a little bit. This is the 80 grit gouge. As well as a sander. So these sanding pads that I use, I also learned that they're used commonly in automotive industry. So for sanding down the sides of cars for paint, these are prep tools. And I did pick up a 3-inch air-powered sander. This is typically used in automotive, so I'm going to try this for woodworking. Don't know how good it's going to be, but I'll let you guys know if it works out great. The next tool on the list is the Japanese pull saw. So these things are very narrow kerf, so very thin blade, and it cuts on the pull stroke, kind of like how a coping saw does. And these saws are absolutely fantastic. Use it for just cutting wood all over the, on the bench. Even use it to part stuff off the lathe, so turn it down very tiny and then just cut off a little last bit. And these saws are super versatile. This one actually has 2 saws in one. So one side is for rip cuts, one side is for cross cuts. And this saves you from having to buy multiple saws. And the one thing is though, I don't actually own a Western style saw where you cut on the push stroke. The main reason is they are expensive. This saw here cost me 60 bucks. Now I do have to buy new blades every like 3 years or so. You can't sharpen the saw. But a Western style saw that only does crosscut or rip cut would be about $120 starting. So it's about half the cost. The last tool on the list is my spindle gouge. So I actually have multiple spindle gouges in the shop, but this one is my absolute favorite. And what makes this one so special is the steel that the cutting bit is made out of. This is M42 tool steel, so it gets super sharp and it stays sharp for a long time. And I can turn several projects before I have to go back to the sharpener. And I actually don't know how many it is because it's just so many. I kind of lose track of how often I sharpen this thing. But this is the Carter and Son who makes this one. They have the metal handle. And the one nice thing about the metal handle is it has some good weight to it. The downside is if you're in an unheated shop, the metal can get really hot and really cold and it just is not comfortable to handle. So if you have a heated shop, go for it, get the metal handle. If you don't, I would say get this thing either unhandled and make your own, or look at a different manufacturer out there. So the whole reason why I had to buy a new spindle gouge this year is my old one has gotten so short that it's becoming hard to sharpen. So you can see the size difference here in the tips. And this tool was just as long as that one at one point. And really what happens is every time you go to the sharpener, you take off a little bit of steel each time to sharpen it. And over time, it just becomes too short to use. And I actually started to grind down the front here to get my sharpening jig on. But this is an older tool. It's the Robert Sorsby spindle gouge, the 3/8. And this newer one with the M42 tool steel leaps and bounds better. It's just a better formulation of the metal, holds the edge longer. That spindle gouge is so much easier to see in my bucket of tools, so my hand immediately goes for it. The other spindle gouge is right here, so if you can't spot it, don't worry about it. So these are the tools that I've used the most this year. There are other tools in this shop equally as good. These are the ones you typically find in my hand. Hopefully you learned something here about some of the tools that I use, and maybe got you thinking about what tools do you use most of the time in the shop. But anyway, thanks for watching and have fun.